I would now like to introduce and welcome one of our sponsors to the event, the UK Space Agency, and their keynote that will be presented by Arfan Chaudhry. Arfan is the head of international policy at the UK Space Agency and will be discussing the UK's evolving role in international space collaboration. So thank you very much for joining us, Arfan. And without further delay, I invite you to the European Space Generation Workshop and to speak.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And I understand that we've got principally colleagues from Europe, but crucially, I understand representatives from Australia and South Africa. And just worth adding that colleagues in the Australian Space Agency and SANSA, we know very well. So that international aspects of space is well represented here today. Let me very quickly introduce myself. I'm the head of international policy at the UK Space Agency. I joined the Space Agency back in May 2018. And I recall that on the 31st of May, almost 2 years ago, 2019, I hosted the inaugural event at Imperial College University in London for the SGAC Europe event. And I was delighted to have provided the opening remarks for that on behalf of the UK Space Agency. So I was delighted to see that. And again, I recall Eloise Matheson hosting that event for us there as well. So I have three key areas of responsibility, one of which is engaging across Whitehall with the other key government departments. And I'll say a little bit more about that, if I may, later in the presentation. But then engaging with the sector, industry and academia. And then finally, with our key international partners. And again, I'll say a little bit more about that as well throughout this presentation. I intend to speak for about 15-20 minutes, but then I would like to open it up to a series of Q&A, if I may. And so please, colleagues, think about some of the questions, challenging questions, if you wish, in terms of the presentation and any particular issues you may have for me as part of the UK Space Agency, but also in preparation for the workshops that are taking place later today and tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing the workshop that will be supporting us in the issue regarding international collaboration. Next slide, please, Zoe. So some of you may be aware that the UK Space Agency undertake on a periodic basis the size and health of the UK space industry. And we have just completed our survey for 2020. And hopefully you can see that clearly there in terms of the detail. But it is worth noting a couple of key factors, if I may, that the total space industry income for certainly 2019 was about 16 billion to the UK. And then secondly, the 5.1 figure there. Our intent as a part of our UKSA strategy is to grow the UK's share of the civil space market to about 10% by 2030. That figure a couple of years back was about 4.6, 4.7%. So it is rising slowly, but 5.1% is the current share of the civil space market that the UK has. And again, the other issue is worth noting that space in itself is dual in nature. So there's civil and military applications that we need to consider as a result. And then as you go through the slide deck, slide there, you'll see obviously the number of direct employees that we have within the space sector. But then crucially, if you look at that bottom right figure there on the red table there, 3 in 4 of our employees have degree level or higher classification. So it just goes to show the level of technology and advancement and the educational skill sets that we're looking for in the space sector. But then also elements of our issues in terms of R&D expenditure, 702 million, and that's specifically within the space sector. And you'll note that there's a commitment from the UK government, and particularly the UK Space Agency and UK Research and Innovation, and our parent department, Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, to increase that level of expenditure on R&D. And then if you look at the right-hand side, you'll see roughly how employment within the UK is developed in terms of the space sector. And again, a big proportion down in the southeast that we've got there, but Scotland, a very strong player in that context as well. But again, it just gives you an indication of where those priorities and where we see growth within the UK and particularly the space sector. But within that, we work closely with our colleagues in the Department for International Trade to bring key international investors into the UK as part of the growth of the space sector. And I'll give a quick shout out, if I may, to the Harwell Space Cluster in Oxford, and then crucially to the developing National Space Park in Leicester. But again, there are other great academic institutions such as Strathclyde and Southampton and others that are developing, and Surrey, that are developing those technologies and capabilities, and the spin-offs that have real-world commercial applications. And then the bottom right corner there, you'll see the export issues in relation to the space sector, circa 5.8 billion, and you'll see principally, just about see it there, and I'll make these slides available to you if I later this week actually. You'll see that obviously Europe is a big partner for us, and again, I'll say more about that, particularly our engagement and involvement with the European Space Agency. But the US is the other aspect of it, Far East, and then South Asia and the Middle East is the key ones there. Next slide, please, Zoe. Taking on this true issue of international collaboration, I just want to say a little bit about this slide. It's probably a little bit outdated now. I think it was 2018 for this slide. We probably do need to look at an update, but again, a shout out to colleagues at both Brightspace and RAND European analysis teams as well. But it gives you an idea, certainly of the major players, and again, this is major players that we've got in the space sector and the areas that they're focusing on. They've got the usual traditional ambitions, but the ones I want to focus on are small satellites and mega constellations. I'll talk about those now, if I may. So from the UK's perspective, we're in the process now, as you may be aware, of looking at horizontal and vertical launch from the UK, principally in relation to elements of space tourism, but also launch of small satellites. And our facilities in Sutherland, in Scotland, and Cornwall in the southwest, will be focusing on those particular areas. We expect to see 2022 the launch of capability from the UK, and in advance of that, we have worked very closely with our regulatory authorities, particularly the Civil Aviation Authority, to develop our legislation and provide the necessary regulatory functions that would support launch capability. So I'd refer you to the Space Industries Act of 2018 and recent moves through Parliament and our legislation to ensure we have the necessary background in legislation and regulation to support safe launch from the UK. And again, we expect to see that developing over the course of the next year or so, and certainly 2022 for launch. And then it's worth noting as well that we've also worked closely with the USA to develop the support for a TSA, Technical Safeguards Agreement, to allow technology and capability from US manufacturers to be launched from the UK as well. And again, that was a major step for us in terms of some of the technology and capability. But then you consider also mega constellations, and we're seeing much more of that recently. And again, the debates that are taking place, particularly in the context of space debris, space junk, and management of the whole environment there, LEO, GEO, and others, in terms of managing those constellations and ensuring that the regulatory and licensing functions are robust and in place. And then you've got the key one for me also sticks out is the yellow, the space tourism, and you'll see much more of that happening now. And again, the yellow dots also are linked to where there'll be appropriate launch facilities. And we'll see some of that, particularly in terms of the UAE development and Australia and others as well. And then you've got the whole piece about close proximity missions and suborbital spaceflight. But I just want to give you a context there of that map. It's probably worth updating this, but looking at the areas of particular focus that countries have, national state players, as well as their own respective industries and academia. But to highlight as well, this spans every time zone and it is global in nature. Next slide, please. So I said I'd talk a little bit about some of our wider engagement. I'd like to start with the top box there in dark blue, UK government. So the agency itself, UK Space Agency, is part of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. We have a CEO, Dr. Graham Turnock, and we have a directed board and a series of non-exec directors. But within that, our ability to operate in the space sector is very much part of our engagement with other government departments. And I specifically mentioned, obviously, the dual nature of space, and we're talking here particularly about MIL-SIV. So our relationship with the Ministry of Defence is key to that. And those of you will note, obviously, the US in relation to the creation of Space Force. The UK has developed now the structures for the UK Space Command, headquarters, literally half an hour from where I am at the moment at RAFI Wickham, but Space Command with the development of policy and strategic elements of that through the MOD headquarters in Whitehall. And again, an important part of our engagement and relationship. And then the other part of that is FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, which recently merged both Foreign Office and the Department for International Development, which covers overseas development aid. And you'll hear more of that if you've joined our workshop this afternoon, and from my colleague Ray, who will say a little bit more about the international partnership program that we have developed and working with key partners, principally in Latin America and South Asia, in terms of developing and using space technology to develop systems and capabilities on Earth. And then the third part of that, is the Department for International Trade. So one of my key areas of responsibility is to look at space through the lens of space science, through security, and then crucially through prosperity and trade. And you saw the first slide I presented in terms of the size and health study for 2018 to see the size, scale, and growth of the space sector, not just within the UK, but globally, and our intent to secure at least 10% of that by 2030. But crucially, we talked about MOD, FCDO, and DIT, but then we also have the links into the Cabinet Office and to number 10, the Prime Minister's Office, principally because we have now established a national space council, and we have developed the functions that support that. And in the current time, we're working towards delivering of a UK national space strategy by the summer of this year. So hopefully, if you invite me back to your event next year, I'll be able to say a little bit more about the development of the Space Council, but crucially, the space strategy and the work that's been undertaken. And then the second part of that box is obviously our engagement with the sector. So industry and academia, and we work closely with both parts of that, principally through trade associations such as UK Space and ADS Space, Aerospace, Defence, Security and Space, and those teams there. But crucially, and as I mentioned earlier, elements such as the Harwell Space Cluster in Oxford, the National Space Park in Leicester, and other areas and institutions around the UK that we support very, very closely, particularly through organisations such as the Space Academic Network. Certainly, so UK colleagues that are on the call will know that in those institutions, those organisations very well. And again, there is that direct interface with industry and academia on a regular basis. And part of my role is to make sure that that interface is done regularly, and we understand how their issues and concerns are being developed, particularly when we look to propose the National Space Strategy and what our priorities are for international growth and direction. And then if I move to the right, it would be remiss of me in a presentation on the UK Space Agency not to talk about the impact of EU exit. And though those of you in Europe will recall particularly the issues and challenges that the UK and Europe have faced in terms of the positioning for the UK in respect of Galileo, and then obviously the advent of the GNSS, and then crucially where we are at the moment, we are now currently developing a joint team with military and civil servants to look at space-based position navigating timing. And that program, SBPP, is currently going through engagement at the moment with the sector and determining the scope of a SBPP might look like for the UK. But again, we're looking at potential collaboration on that as well. And if you look back, and I say this sort of from a personal and honest perspective, the issues regarding Galileo, in my humble opinion, have been a sort of lose-lose position on both sides. But we are where we are, a commitment that was made, referendum was taken, and we have issues that we now need to address. There are other two there, Horizon Europe and Copernicus, and again, debates and discussions are taking place at the moment regarding scope in and out of scope for UK industry and academia to participate and engage. And that will continue, well, ongoing discussions, but there will be resolution shortly on that. If I then go on to the European Space Agency, worth noting, established in 1975, UK was a founding member of the European Space Agency. Long after we've left the European Union in terms of the EU exit, we will continue to be a long-standing member of the European Space Agency. In fact, the same year that the referendum results were announced, the UK actually increased our contribution to the European Space Agency. And again, it rests at about £374 million a year that we invest into key technology and capability through the European Space Agency. And we're already now preparing for ESA Council in 2022. And I should add that whereas at the moment I'm the head of international policy, with effect from 14th of June, I will be taking over from Dr. Alice Bunn as the international director of the for the UK Space Agency. And as a result, I will be the head of the UK delegation at ESA. And I genuinely look forward to those opportunities and say those active discussions and negotiations that will take place in preparation for CMIN 22 and the discussions on the national budgets. The next part of that is the NSIP, the National Space Innovation Programme, which is where I have been principally involved. Much of our budget, probably about 80–90% of our budget, goes through ESA. And it's worth noting that we didn't have a directed, dedicated national space programme to develop national capability, but also international bilateral relations. And so as a result, we developed secured funding for a modest investment into an NSIP pilot Pathfinder program in 2021, which sought to develop our own national capability and develop those strategic bilateral relationships. And as a result, we have funding now for an NSIP. We're about to go through what's known as a comprehensive spending review to secure multi-year funding for the sector. That will take place in the summer of this year with effect from April 2022, but securing multi-year investment, significant ramp up in that NSIP program for both national and international capability. And the intention is to complement the work we're doing under ESA. So when you look at the UK, fourth largest contributor into ESA, but when you look at Germany, Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, others, they have strong national bilateral programs that sit alongside their ESA commitment. And that's our intent and planning in terms of the National Space Innovation Program. If I'd known about South Africa earlier, I probably would have put South Africa on the map and the SANSA organization, but our bilateral relationships, and I'll give two examples there, particularly Australia and Japan, for these reasons, if I may. The Australia Space Agency is probably 2 or 3 years old now, but crucially, when it was established, we were one of the first countries to develop a formal MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the Australian Space Agency. And more recently, we've signed off on the Australia-UK Space Bridge. I'd encourage you to go to the UKSA.gov.uk website and insert the words UK-Australia Space Bridge. But that talks about developing the capabilities between our respective space agencies and departments for international trade to develop technology and capability. And then JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, we work closely with them. And in a particular program that came out of the National Space Innovation Program, we developed greater collaboration and cooperation with them as well on particular programs. But that's just two examples of the many international relationships that we've got. And then if you go on to multilateral relationships, the key one for us, and it's caused, led me to be very busy last year, was the development and the UK being a signatory of the Artemis Accords. So in the context of that, you may be aware that the Artemis Accords was signed at the virtual IAC last year with the NASA administrator and the principally agency heads, but also ministerial appointments for the following countries. So it was Australia, Canada, the UK, Luxembourg, Italy, the UAE. And we understand recently that certainly intent from both South Korea and Brazil to sign up to be partners of the Artemis Accords. So the Accords themselves are very much designed to form a sort of operationalization of the Space Act 1967, Space Treaty, sorry, of 1967, and operationalize that. You may well recall that when we announced the signing of the Artemis Accords at the virtual IAC last year, there were a couple of countries, and I talked specifically about Russia and China, that expressed issues and concerns, particularly in the context of the fact that they wouldn't be signing up to that. And again, this is the part and the challenge of developing multilateral by trilateral relationships, but ensuring that there is space for all, and the intent certainly that would underpin the Artemis Accords. And it is worth noting, and I'm happy to share this with you, but the language for the Artemis Accords, again, is available on the UK Space Agency website, as it is on those other spacefaring nations that signed up to the Accords. But there was robust conversations that took place between respective nations in terms of the final language that appeared in those Artemis Accords. And the intent of the Artemis program, as you're no doubt aware, is to get the next man and the first woman on the surface of the moon by the middle of this decade. So next decade, sorry. And the intent is still there, and it's good to see that the pronouncements from the White House, and particularly from the NASA administrator, regarding reinforcing that commitment to the Artemis program. I should also add that at the UNUSA legal subcommittee that's taking place next week, the intention is to hold a panel discussion on the Artemis Accords, particularly in the context of safe and sustainable space exploration. And I'm delighted to report that a representative from the SGAC, I won't name the individual, but hopefully he knows who he is, will be moderating that panel, and it will include representatives from the Artemis Accord signatories, but also Simonetta Di Pippo from the UNUSA office as well. And then the final part of that is obviously our multilateral fora, and particularly the UN, G7, and G7 hosting in Cornwall this year is quite important for us. Next slide, please. This is a photograph that was taken, that's me on the left, if you can just see me there, at the heads of delegations for the UK Space Conference that took place in 2019. And we were able to bring a number of distinguished colleagues and guests from international space partner nations across the globe, including Australia and South Africa. Within that, I'm not going to, I'll leave you, I'll tease you a little bit, so who those 4 on the right are there. But again, we might want to come back to that in the Q&A chat. But if not, I'll come back to that one. But just to show the international dimension of space and to bring representatives from these countries together on a particular theme is, in my opinion, remarkable and incredible. So I'll leave that one there for your thoughts. Next slide, please. So before we go into any questions, I'm going to now attempt, and Zoe, I hope this worked, to share this final slide, if I may. Let me see if I can do this. I seem to have lost it. Sorry, give me 30 seconds. While you're doing that, please have a think about any of the issues or questions that you want to raise. Sorry. There we go.
So I'll just
can everybody see that?
We cannot, Arfan. So I'm gonna jump to Q&A now because we are running a little low on time. So we can share all your slides with the delegates later on. So we'll start with the most popular question, which is from Joshua, and it is: how can the development of the UK spaceports in Cornwall and Sutherland best be utilised in education and outreach to inspire school children and students to pursue a career in the space industry?
Right, so that's a great question, and we're already seeing some of that at the moment. I referenced the fact that the UK will be hosting G7 in Cornwall, and principally a key element of that discussion was about the launch of the spaceport facilities in Cornwall and in Sutherland. We're already taking an active educational outreach program as part of our launch program for 2022. I understand schools and universities have already been approached in terms of some of those competitions. And programs, but I'd ask you to look out for, as we prepare for the G7, there are a couple of great programs to be announced. I've got to be very careful because it's under PERDA regarding engagement with students, but particularly some of the great competitions that we're planning and proposing. And you may well recall that when we launched the Rosalind Franklin Mars rover, we had a competition that went out to schools and academic institutions regarding the naming of the rover. But there are some great exciting programs that we've identified. If there are any particular areas or you want further detail, my colleagues Jeremy Curtis and Kathy Bowden on the educational outreach program with schools, and then also specifically related to the launch can provide further detail on that. And I'm happy to share that with you after this this call. You're on mute, Zoe.
So we'll move on to the next question. The next question is, if possible, how can a non-UK national join and work for the UK Space Agency?
So good question in terms of nationalities. I'll need to check, but I do think we have some international colleagues that are joining the agency. It depends on the nature of the work that they're undertaking. Some of the work obviously requires higher security classifications, but in terms of the nationalities, I'll need to come back to you. But I think if you go onto the UK Civil Service Jobs website, Civil Service Jobs, the posts are advertised there for the UKSA. And there will be clear requirements in terms of the nationality that are provided. But we do have an international mix within the UKSA at the moment. So again, some of those posts may well be advertised, but the Civil Service Jobs website, the UKSA in particular, and against each of those, it will give clear distinctions on terms of the security clearances and nationality of those applying.
So the next question we have is, what will be, or what were the major impacts of the UK leaving the EU for the UK Space Agency?
So I think the key one, I think I referenced it, and I took a slightly personal perspective, if I may, but that the issue regarding Galileo, I think, was a key one for us. But then there's also the challenge that, there's the political lords of masters, and we live in democracies. Those were the decisions that were taken. We then had to look at how we balanced our commitment and looking at the technology and the capabilities that we wanted to advance. And so you see, obviously, our commitment to ESA has been reinforced as it was after the referendum result. But we're now also looking to complement that with our national space innovation program. So I think that's probably been one of the key aspects of that, a strong national and a bilateral program, but also looking what I see as a reinforced commitment within ESA and those particular programs that we fund and work on, particularly in terms of space science, exploration, Mars sample return, deep space comms, lunar communications. Those are the areas that we will continue to work through our partnerships with the European Space Agency. But equally, alongside France, Germany, Italy, Spain, we want to develop a strong national program that will effectively complement our ESA contributions. But the EU exit, particularly in terms of Horizon Europe, in terms of Galileo, in terms of Copernicus, those issues are reverberating. They're still ongoing, but some of those have been cleared. But as I say, on the Galileo, I personally see that as I think it was a lose-lose position. But equally, we've got to work ahead and look at what we're defining through GNSS and through the space-based position navigating timing program.
So I'm trying to go quickly because we have a lot of questions. So the next one is, how is the UK Space Agency aiming to promote space entrepreneurship in the region and support hubs such as Harwell Space Cluster?
We do that on a regular basis. In fact, I was in calls yesterday, and Zoe, quite personal to you in terms of Plymouth, particularly in the context of inward investment opportunities for the UK and the free port status that Plymouth has now secured, what that means in terms of supply chain issues, particularly in the southwest. But if you recall that second slide of the Science and Health Study where I talked about the UK and the map and where the growth is in terms of the space sector, we're seeing it very much across the whole of the UK. And working with our colleagues in DIT, we're looking to bring strong inward investment into the UK, and that's led by the Prime Minister and crucially our key ministers. But across the globe, we have embassies and high commissions with colleagues as part of the Science Innovation Network who work very closely with us to identify those engagements and those inward investment opportunities. And again, ensuring that the UK remains an attractive place for entrepreneurs and companies to want to come and invest and develop and grow their technology and capability. And part of that is the skill set. You talked about the workforce that we have in the space sector. And crucially, the issue for there is to ensuring that we've got the necessary arrangements and that people can come and work in the UK, given the earlier question that we had, and that the elements of freedom of movement, but also the environment, the conditions and the context that allow for that. And when we talk about the conditions, we, the UK Space Agency and government, don't deliver the growth. It's industry and academia and entrepreneurs. Our job is to facilitate and provide the right conditions in the environment So the conversations with industry, academia, and individuals is happening on a regular basis. We've got to be determined as to ensure, one, we've got necessary budgets. And the Space Industries Act 2018, a remarkable feat of work, and the signing off of the TSA with our US colleagues in terms of preparations for launch are just part of the role the UK government can play in developing that technology and that capability.
So thank you very much again, Arfan. We've unfortunately ran out some time. There are still some questions left, and I think we can all agree that was really interesting and engaging. So to the people who have some questions that were not answered, please feel free to go to the UKSA booth in the Expo tab, and you can leave your questions and people can answer them. Arfan is here. He's already said that he'll be here as well for the working groups, but there are other people that will be taking part as well, and they might be able to answer your questions also. So for those in the Fostering International Relations workshop, you'll see Arfan again tomorrow. We'll be having a break now, so if you could go to the hallway, there'll be some networking opportunities there. And we'll meet back here at 10:30 for a keynote from Hyperion Technologies. So once again, thank you very much, Arfan. That was really interesting, and you can see by the level of questions, it was very engaging as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just say a special thanks to the ESGW Organising Committee, Zoe and Pilar, for your excellent organisation. And I look forward to seeing you all in person, either at the Space Symposium or at IAC in Dubai. Thank you.
Great. Everyone, enjoy your break. 10:30, come back here to the stage area.